Hi everybody, Danielle here. I'm excited to jump into our final workshop. And this one is super connected into taking action because we're looking at some of your key performance indicators and the initial calculations or considerations that you need to make in a little bit more detail so that we can really make an action plan for the next month, 6 month, year that will start putting your plan into progress and implementing it. So this connects in, like I was just saying, to the Map Your Mission course, day 5, and it's all about taking action and taking all of that clarity on what you aim to achieve, which you've worked through in a lot of detail so far, and getting started on formulating the plan to put it into action and to execute and make it happen. Because of course, all of this planning is worthless if we don't take action from it afterwards. So I shared this quote that I really love when it comes to illustrating the value of putting a good plan into place. And that is, if you don't know where you are going, you'll end up someplace else. Yogi Berra, who's a baseball player from back in the day, and he has a bunch of really fun and wise quotes. Some of them are a bit cheeky. But the reason I like this one is because it sounds so simple, and yet it's so true. If you are not setting some targets or really being conscious and clear about where you're headed, and not just in the broad picture, we've done the broad strokes, but to be clear where you're headed now in the more detail-oriented specifics as we go forward, if you don't chart those out, you will end up someplace else. It's inevitable that you'll go with the flow and, potentially not end up where you are trying to go. So it's something that is worth paying attention to. And especially when you're a social entrepreneur, because you are juggling all kinds of competing interests in terms of balancing your social and economic results and goals, and also balancing a lot of different needs and desires from the stakeholders that you're slotting together. Often in social enterprise, it's not as cut and dry as one widget selling to one audience. Often there's more pieces of the puzzle that you need to fit together, and that just means there's more ways things can go sideways. So it's a little bit more complex, and that's exactly why it's important to do this planning early on. So one of the main exercises I want to talk about in this workshop is the back of the envelope. And this exercise helps you take a really high level, first stab at looking for how you are going to, what results you're seeking in terms of the financial side and the social side. So, in day 4, we talked about criteria, and some of those factors that you determined as, things you wanted to rank your ideas on, some of those will spill into this exercise because, of course, those are the most important social and financial considerations that you want to keep in mind. But now you're looking at one idea and you are you are mapping out this back of the envelope so that you have this picture of, where can you go with this idea and what does that look like in terms of financial results and social or environmental results. So the back of the envelope helps you determine all of the major startup costs, possible revenues, and expenses, and work through a break-even analysis so that you can be sure the business will start generating enough money to sustain itself before the startup money runs out. And it just gives you a sense of how the numbers fall with your business idea and how it might shake out into the future. So it's very quick and dirty. This is by no means a proper or full pro forma, projection on your financials or anything like that. This is called the back of the envelope because the idea is you're sitting down at a restaurant with a friend of yours and you tell them about this cool idea that you have, and they ask, okay, so what do the numbers look like in the first year? Is it all going to work? And you can pull an envelope out of your bag that's, from the mail or something and jot down your ideas and your analysis for a quick and dirty version of what it's all going to shape up to be. So if we get started on the financial side of things, there's a few steps that I want to talk about. The first one is to look at the major upfront costs or fixed costs that are required to start up in the first year. Depending on what kind of enterprise you're thinking of running, the startup costs could be quite significant. So keep in mind as you're going through this exercise, if you might need to split out and kind of do two financial calculations, one on the startup costs themselves, or if the upfront costs are not super crazy and just a little bit higher in year one than in subsequent years, I would say for this exercise, you can mix it into this calculation, which is what I'm going to show you. And we'll go through an example so it makes more sense. And if you're really not into numbers, don't stress out. Don't worry about doing it super correctly right now. Like I said, the goal is quick and dirty, and it's by no means going to account for every little piece of what you need to consider going forward, but it's going to give you the big picture so that you can then make your action plan for the first year. So after you have your upfront costs or your fixed costs, so they are either one-time costs to get going, or they don't change, month to month. You have to maybe rent a space, an office space or a storefront. That will represent a fixed cost that you have every month. No matter how many customers or clients you serve, you will always have to pay that amount. And the other big costing factor that we want to look at, of course, is variable costs. So those will change depending on how many you sell of whatever your product or service is, and be variable according to that number. And then we want to look at what's the potential revenue you could earn per customer. So that could be the sale price of something if it's a product, or a package, a coaching package that you might be running. And what is the average, revenue that you could bring in per customer or per client? And in our example, you'll see it could be more than one item at a time. If you think most of your customers will come into your shop and buy 3 things, you can take that into account and just lump it all together, potential revenue per customer. So if we look at an example, one that I thought would be a nice simple one to walk through is an idea of an online retailer, so a web store that is reselling products from artisans around the world. Ethical, fair trade merchandise, and connecting artisan products from different parts of the world into the Western purchasing power, where people might want to look for really wonderful products that they know are ethically sourced and fair trade, and supporting artisans who need that economic support, and also just buying wonderful things for their homes or for gifts or whatever it might be. So this is connecting those different markets, and it's a really great type of social enterprise that we can look at. So in terms of major upfront costs for this first year starting this up, we definitely want to look at investing in a website in terms of designing all of the visual components and developing the back end. We need to have a store through which to sell the products. We might want to invest in showing up at some trade shows or markets or festivals, and some of them would require buying a booth or paying for a booth rental fee. And that's a great way to get out in person and show off the product. We might want to also account for a minimum salary for the founders. So, maybe you don't want to take salary in the very beginning, but it could be different depending on your situation. What do you want to include that in your startup costs? Maybe. Or even a portion of it. So let's say you have some savings in place to help you with the startup phase until you're breaking even, but you also want to account for in your first back of the envelope exercise some salary or a little bit of payout from the company to help, prolong your savings as you get started. And, again, that's going to be different for everybody, but something to keep in mind. Maybe we also want to think about marketing costs. So let's just lump this all together and do a super rough estimate. And let's say $20,000 for year one would really put you in a good spot in terms of upfront costs and get you where you think you need to go in that first year. And again, this has kind of these one-time year one costs included, like the website design and development. Although that one you might want to, that might be a fixed cost every year because you might want to continually update and upgrade the software that you have. So anyways, that's if the startup costs are not super significant. If by chance you were looking at an idea where you needed to invest in a new factory or like a brick and mortar location where you needed to do a bunch of renovations to open, like a coffee shop, for example, then you would want to take those upfront costs and separate them out of this calculation, because that's kind of a different beast, and you'll probably be looking at financing or grants or an investor to support some of that startup funding. Okay. Next, we want to look at what are your variable costs per unit sold. So in this example, things like shipping supplies and the cost to ship each order, each package. You want to account for the actual cost of the goods. So whatever you're selling, whether that be jewelry or homewares or bags, scarves, all that kind of thing, that would need to be accounted for, of course. And in a store like this, an example like this, these costs are definitely going to vary, but just pick an average for now. So let's say on average, $15 per sale is probably what your variable costs are going to be. And then you want to look at the potential revenue per customer. So remember I said in our example, one customer might come to your shop and in an average order buy a few different things. Some people might buy one very low priced item. Some people might buy one high priced item, but let's just pick an average to start with. So $35 a sale. Now in step 2, we want to look at how many units do you need to sell to break even. So this is the minimum to reach that coveted financial sustainability where you can keep going indefinitely without burning through cash or other resources. And that's the first huge milestone that you want to hit when you're ramping up and starting up, obviously, because before you reach sustainability, you are losing money and have to fill in those gaps with savings, with debt, with financing, or equity or grants, or friends and family. There's all different means that you could use to fill those gaps. But the goal, of course, is to hit a point in your business where you don't need to go into those reserves and where you're shooting from there for more upside so that you can grow, so that you can pay back any debt you've used, and so on. So for break even, we want to take our fixed costs and divide that by the amount from each sale that is extra after we've paid for our variable costs. So revenue per customer minus variable costs. So in our example, our fixed costs are $20,000, super rough, but that's okay. We're just getting started. And our revenue per customer estimate is $35 per order per customer. And we're guessing variable costs of $15 related to that. So the contribution from every order is $20. And if we do the math, that means that we need 100 sales or orders or units in year one to break even and cover all of those fixed and variable costs that we have. Or we can break it down, it's a little bit easier to digest, into 83 sales per month. Okay, now step 3, we know what our break even is. At capacity, how much can you expect to make in year 1? So break even hopefully arrives at a point not too late in the process. It will definitely vary depending on your business. But after that, what is the upside? You know, if you continue to grow, if in our example, more and more customers continue to find this wonderful store and to make purchases, how much can you deliver in 1 year? So we want to look at how many potential customers could you serve in your first year. And let's say 200 sales a month could be manageable for you given the resources you've put in so far. And of course that could vary. Maybe some months you could handle more, some months is less, but on average that might be reasonable. Again, you're just going off your gut and any kind of limited information you have to make these assumptions. They're definitely some big assumptions, but it's a starting point, and that's the goal here. So if we did 200 sales a month, that would be 2,400 a year. And if we take that 2,400 a year, our number of orders, and times it by $35, the revenue for 1 year could be, you know, if we have enough customers, we could get up to around $84,000 a year. Now, what are our expenses in this scenario? If we take that same 2,400 orders or customers and times it by $15 fixed cost, plus times it by $15 variable costs, plus our $20,000 in fixed costs for the year, we see that we could estimate total expenses in year 1 of $56,000. And then we do the math for our net income, and it arrives at $28,000. So it's great. We have our break even, which is 1,000 sales a year, 83 sales a month. If we're able to do a really great job with our marketing and expansion and getting the word out and all those wonderful things, maybe we could get up to this 200. We would be earning a good chunk of profit. And of course, from this profit comes off things like taxes and all of that fun stuff. But we're not going to worry about the details. We just have a picture of what is possible with our plan. Great. Now we want to also consider the social side of things and do a quick back of the envelope on the social impact and results that we're looking for. So given this model and given what you determined from the financial side of things, how many beneficiaries could you serve on a monthly basis? And how many could you serve on an annual basis? So in this example, you know, we could talk about the artisans themselves, which are the main beneficiary, of course, and make an estimate based on how many sales we think we can achieve, how many we need to achieve, at what price points, and then see, okay, how many artisans do we think we could support on a monthly and annual basis? For the average artisan, how many products do they have? And you know, you would know this information more than I would in terms of making these calls about what to include here, of course. But let's say the average artisan produces 3 to 5 really great products that you would want to stock in your store. So how many products do you think you need in your store to achieve those financial numbers you mapped out? And what does that equate to in terms of beneficiaries? So now you can start to see with the model that you've outlined, really what would that impact look like for those artisans, and how much can you handle in terms of the level of support, the level of impact that you can have. The other 2 parts for this part, the social back of the envelope, is to think about the depth and the breadth of the impact. And so this again connects back into your criteria. But ask yourself now, as it relates to this business idea that I'm mapping out, what does that depth of impact look like for each artisan, how much will this actually change their life? In what ways will it change their life? What does that look like to them? And also the breadth. So in this example, maybe it's the breadth is less important, you know, to what extent you could work on several or impact several people's lives. But ask yourself both questions and see how it shakes out with the idea that you're thinking about. Okay, so that's the back of the envelope. Like I said, quick and dirty. And it's just a starting point, a jumping off point. Now that we have a bit of a picture of what we can achieve in this first year, we want to take a step back and think about the early indicators, the key performance indicators that will drive those financial results and drive those social results. So this starts to give us an idea of these targets. What are we going to need to shoot for in a very specific way in order to make those back of the envelope scenarios work? And if you guys have used key performance indicators before, I'm sure you have in some way or another, but just a quick reminder that they should be very simple, they should be measurable, so often quantitative, or if they're, quantitative is the best, because then it's quick and easy to measure, and it's easy to compare month over month, week over week. They need to be trackable, so you need to be able to observe them or look them up somehow, or you know, keep notes about them, whatever it might be. You need to be able to see it. And then relevant to the goals and targets that you're setting out to achieve. So in our example, maybe some of the financial key performance indicators for this artisan web shop could be monthly website visitors, monthly newsletter subscribers. We would definitely want to track the website conversion rate. So based on how many visitors we have per month, how many are customers, and what's that percentage month over month. We would want to look at daily, weekly, monthly sales, both in number of orders and dollar amount of the orders, and also the average sale per customer. So you can start to see how these key performance indicators act as feedback triggers back into all of the things we looked at in your back of the envelope. So you continually start to gain more information as you're tracking these indicators, and that informs your financial pro formas, your projections, and your social pro formas and your estimates about the impact that you can achieve. On the social side, in our example, maybe we want to track number of artisans with goods that we have stocked. Maybe we're also going to look at how many products we stock per artisan. Again, you want to make sure it's relevant. So when you're thinking about the impact that you want to achieve with these people, does it matter to them, or does it make a difference if you stock 5 of their products versus 2? Maybe it's more important that you are able to increase your sales, which helps in this case the financial side of things, plus will obviously increase the economic benefit to those artisans as well. So I think that's a really fun example to walk through. Obviously it's pretty quick, but you can see how much information you can start to put down on paper that you already have in your head, and you're just mapping it out in this back of the envelope. And you could take an hour or half an hour and jot these things down and really have a good sense of the big picture of what you can achieve and what you need to get there. Because now you know where the holes are, now you know where the leverage points are. And at this point, you want to consider any adaptations that you might need to make to your plan based on what you unearthed in your back of the envelope and based on the top financial and social key performance indicators that you determined are important to keep track of, right? And then once you have all of that, you can really get started taking action and executing on your plan, because you know now exactly what's most important you know the targets that you're going to need to hit in order for the math to work. You're going to have a sense of the timeline on break even. So when you do that break even number and realize that you need to sell 83 orders a month, then you ask yourself, when you're starting to do your project plan, what do I need to do in order to get to that 83 orders a month? And you really start to get a sense of, okay, if I know I only have 6 months to make this thing fly. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of cash, or I'm going to need to switch gears. If you have that constraint of I have 6 months to break even because of financial considerations, and based on my numbers, I know that break even is 83 units a month. Now you have the constraints to make a project plan that you are pretty confident will get you to 83 orders a month within 6 months. And then you set out and make it happen. So it's, I think, a great way to jump off your project planning. As you can tell, there's whole in putting this plan into action in terms of literally mapping out all of the components that need to get taken, all you need to take. But it's the first starting point. And I hope that was helpful for you. I have some others in terms of going through to the more detailed planning side of things. And so we can talk about that as well, if that's what you need help with going forward. Okay. Great. I hope you guys enjoyed this part. And I just want to say, too, don't let yourself get overwhelmed by these back of the envelope exercises. I know if I start throwing too many numbers and calculations at you, it can feel super daunting and just like too much, too hard to figure out. So I just want to let you know it's okay to do it wrong. It's going to be wrong. This is the thing with projections. No matter, how much detail you end up putting into your calculations, they will still be wrong once you start taking action and once you start getting results and comparing it. So this is just kind of the top of the funnel and maybe has the most kind of error from projections to reality. But you need to start somewhere. And like I said, once you start measuring those key performance indicators and putting your project management plan into action, that information will reinforce and reinform these calculations and assumptions as you go. So it's really a continual process to track all of these measures and keep things going. And last thing I'll say is that there is a lot more in-depth methodology to, of course, track and measure your social and environmental impact. And that's a big topic in terms of assessing the actual impact side of your social enterprise. So just know that this is scratching the surface, and there's a lot more to learn if you are excited about getting into the details of all of this. And I can point you in the right direction if you want to learn more about the details of both the financial side and the social impact measurement side. So I wish you the best of luck with all of your planning, all of the work that you want to do on your social enterprise, and I look forward to supporting you in that journey. I will sign off for now, but please do stay in touch and let me know if you have any questions, and let's figure things out together. Okay, take care. Bye.